Psychological effects of torture. When people think of torture, the first thing that comes to mind is physical, unendurable pain. As terrible as the physical effects of torture may be, the real horror is what remains in the mind. Torture is one of the techniques often used to brainwash people by governments all around the world, and in some form or another, it seems to have always been around. Brainwashing, one of the psychological effects of torture, seems to have always been around as well. Torture is a brainwashing technique used to change people's beliefs and attitude so that they make decisions and do the action the manipulator desires through the use of force on a subject. The end result is a person or persons with different beliefs and values who typically believe very strongly in some ideas to the point that they want to convert others to their ideology. In fact, the person may be so different from before, they may have changed so much that they are said to have a pseudo personality, which basically means that they have repressed their original self. Frequently, the family and friends of these individuals say that they don't recognize them anymore. The term brainwashing was first used by Edward Hunter in the 1950s after studying American soldiers who were prisoners of the Chinese. When the prisoners were released, many of them were denouncing Western ideas and had converted to communism. This caused a big scare because it was thought the Chinese had finally found a way to control other people's minds. But subsequent studies revealed that the brainwashing techniques being used by the Chinese were not new, and a lot of the techniques have been used before to torture people, and many of the psychological techniques have been used in destructive cults for hundreds of years. Torture inflicts severe pain to force someone to do or say something. It has been used against prisoners of war, suspected insurgents, and political prisoners for hundreds of years. Torture, on the other hand, seems to be much older than the term brainwashing. It actually goes back to the 530 AD, when the Roman Empire used torture to extract confessions from criminals. Similarly, in the book 1984, written by George Orwell, the Ministry of Love uses torture to get confessions from suspected criminals. The majority of the time, the so-called criminals think that they have committed a crime and that they should pay for it because their brain has already been changed to think what the party wants them to think. Torture damages memory systems, making it harder for these individuals to tell the difference between real life events and what is being made up by the party. More often than not, the person would end up facing the consequences of a crime not even committed by them. They get tortured to the point of agreeing with the party, even if whatever they're agreeing on makes no sense. Torture victims often feel guilt and shame triggered by the humiliation they have endured. All such symptoms are normal human responses to abnormal and inhumane treatment. These are part of the psychological effects of torture. An example of this is shown in the book when the old man was being tortured at the Ministry of Love. It says, "Do anything to me," he yelled. "You've been starving me for weeks. Finish it off and let me die. Shoot me, hang me, sentence me to 25 years. Is there somebody else you want me to give away? Just say who is it and I'll tell you anything you want. I don't care who is it or what you do to them. I've got a wife and 3 children. The biggest one of them is 6 years old. You can take the whole lot of them and cut their throats in front of my eyes, and I'll stand by and watch it, but not Room 101. This proves that the type of torture the party employs is so intense that the people subjected to it are ready to betray anything and anyone to avoid it. They have been brainwashed over a period of time, tortured little by little through small details of their lives that may seem unimportant, such as always having the fear of doing something because of the poster that say Big Brother is watching you. And this allows the party to have control over their thoughts, and that's how the party gets the people to do anything they tell them to, even betray their loved ones. Recent studies indicate that 50% of all countries continue to practice systematic torture despite a universal ban. Sometimes we don't even hear from these cases, but it happens. Most of these countries use torture to brainwash people into different beliefs. A feeling of helplessness is central to the torture cycle. According to an expert on the subject of torture, The feeling of helplessness is much more dramatic in a situation where the individual knows he's facing an all-powerful enemy. In the book 1984, we see Winston having this feeling of helplessness because he knows the party is much more powerful than his own feelings and thoughts. On the book, Winston understands the effects torture has on him and Julia. It says, "What have you done to Julian?" said Winston. O'Brien smiled again. "She betrayed you, Winston, immediately. I have seldom seen anyone come over to us so promptly. You would hardly recognize her if you saw her. All her rebelliousness, her deceit, her folly, her dirty-mindedness, everything has been burned out of her. It was a perfect conversion, a textbook case." "You torture her?" After hearing of Julia's betrayal, Winston understands that the torture they are being subjected to by the party is powerful enough to destroy a feeling of love that they said to have towards each other. Winston is certain that she was subjected to torture just as he was. Based on research, the feeling of love and the brain are very much connected, yet torture was able to manipulate Julia's thoughts, therefore her senses, which made her forget about her feelings and her love towards Winston, even to the point of betraying him. The psychological symptoms can often be worse in the sense that the person can never recover from that, and may in the end be in such despair and pain that they take their own lives, especially if they don't have the treatment or support around them. Experts say that torture victims can develop PTSD, or called post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and symptoms such as social withdrawal, confusion, and sleep problems. At the end of the book, Winston remembers a happy family moment with his mother and sister, but he wonders if it's a false memory. It says, "For a whole afternoon they had all been happy together," meaning Winston, his sister, and his mother, because they were playing games. He pushed the picture out of his mind. It was a false memory. He was troubled by false memories occasionally. This gives us a sense that after all he has been through, after experiencing torture, it indeed affected his mind. He was suffering from confusion between reality and what was said to be only dreams. And this is part of the psychological effects of torture on the brain. Often torture victims suffer from elevated rates of anxiety, depression, PTSD, nightmares, insomnia, memory lapses, reduced capacity to learn, emotional flatness, and periodic headaches. It says, "The cage was near. It was closing in. Winston heard a succession of shrill which appeared to be occurring in the air above his head, but he fought furiously against his panic. To think, even when the split second left, to think was the only hope. Suddenly, the full musty odor of the burst struck his nostrils. There was a violent convulsion of nausea inside him, and he almost lost consciousness. Everything had gone black. For an instant, he was insane, a screaming animal. Yet he came out of the blackness clutching an idea. There was only one way to save him. He must interpose another human being, the body of another human being between himself and the rats. Winston felt anxiety with the only thought that he would have to face his worst fear. He was having a psychological effect, and he ended up doing what the party initially wanted him to do, which was agree with them. And this marked the party's victory because they cured Winston. They technically brainwashed them into thinking what everyone else had to think. Similarly, in the Hunger Games, Peeta is captured by the Capitol, and they start torturing him because they thought that he would be more useful once he thinks the same way as people from the Capitol, and once he agrees with their beliefs, because it will be much easier to tell him what or what not to do. They torture him to the point that it seems like he doesn't even think by himself. It seems like he has someone else's words put into his mouth to say everything he's saying. He also seems depressed. He looks very sad from the initial movie. Well, where at the initial movie he looked more happier and cheerful. He looks very sad and depressed. At the end of the movie, they show Peeta and Katniss in a very peaceful place. This happened after the torture he went through. And in the very peaceful place,